about leadership judgment, until finally an assistant replied, stating that Mr. Reed would be available for exactly 15 minutes. Virtually. No cameras, no press, and no agenda beyond listening. And when the meeting began, Marcus appeared on screen in a simple office, no art on the walls, no visible symbols of wealth, while Evelyn sat rigid in her glass tower surrounded by trophies and awards, and for the first time since becoming CEO, she did not speak first. Marcus let the silence stretch, long enough to make a point, long enough to let memory do the work, and then he asked calmly whether she remembered the summit, whether she remembered the handshake, and Evelyn, cornered by truth, attempted to rationalize, to explain, to contextualize, but Marcus stopped her gently, saying that intent mattered less than impact, that leadership was revealed in reflexes, not rehearsals, and that he had built his career investing in people who understood that respect was not a favor but a baseline. The twist Evelyn did not anticipate came next because Marcus revealed that he had once admired her from afar, had even defended Hartwell internally during the lawsuit years ago, arguing that companies could change, that people could evolve, and that it was precisely because he believed in second chances that he paid attention to small moments, because small moments showed whether change was real. And then he told her something that cracked the armor she had spent a lifetime polishing, that he had grown up watching his father, a brilliant engineer, be passed over again and again by executives who smiled while doing nothing, executives who would never shake his hand but would gladly take his ideas, and that he promised himself that when he finally held power, he would never beg for dignity. And so when Evelyn ended the meeting with a carefully phrased apology and a renewed request for partnership, Marcus declined without hostility, stating simply that trust, once broken, was not a commodity that could be bought back at market price. The fallout was swift and public, because when word leaked that Evelyn had sought Marcus's favor and been denied, analysts began questioning her emotional intelligence, activist shareholders demanded diversity audits, and a former Hartwell executive came forward describing a pattern of dismissive behavior toward minority partners. And though none of it was illegal, all of it was damaging. And within months Hartwell's board quietly pressured Evelyn to step down for strategic renewal, a phrase that tasted like ash, while Celira, under Marcus's guidance, partnered with international firms, expanded access to clean energy, and became a case study in ethical capitalism taught in business schools across the country. The final twist came a year later at another summit, this time in Chicago, where Marcus, now widely respected as a kingmaker, was approached by a young white female founder who nervously extended her hand and thanked him for believing in people others overlooked, and Marcus shook her hand warmly, smiling, because the story was never about revenge, it was about standards, about consequences, about the quiet power of choosing where to place your respect. And somewhere in a smaller office far from the spotlight, Evelyn Hart watched the live stream of that summit, understanding at last that the moment she refused a handshake was the moment she chose who she would become, and history, unmoved by excuses, simply recorded the result. The first time it happened, everyone pretended not to notice, which was exactly what Evelyn Hart had expected them to do, because as the newly crowned CEO of Hartwell Dynamics, a Fortune 500 technology conglomerate headquartered in Manhattan, she had learned that silence was the cleanest weapon privilege ever invented. And so when Marcus Reed, a soft-spoken but sharply dressed black investor with a reputation for spotting billion-dollar ideas before they hatched, extended his hand across the polished glass conference table at a private capital summit in San Francisco, Evelyn merely smiled, clasped her leather portfolio, and turned to greet the white venture capitalist beside him instead, leaving Marcus's hand hovering in the air like a question no one wanted answered. And in that fraction of a second the room shifted, because power had just declared itself without saying a word. Marcus slowly withdrew his hand, his face calm, his eyes unreadable, the kind of stillness that only comes from long familiarity with disrespect, and the moderator hurried on, praising Hartwell's quarterly growth, while Evelyn internally congratulated herself on maintaining control, telling herself she had simply avoided an awkward interaction, that optics mattered, that she did no courtesy to someone whose fund had once challenged her father's leadership years earlier, because yes, that was the buried truth. Marcus Reed's firm had nearly dismantled Hartwell Dynamics a decade ago over ethics violations, and although the case ended in settlement, Evelyn had never forgiven the humiliation her family endured. So in her mind this was not about race, it was about history, about dominance, about reminding an old adversary that she now stood above him. What Evelyn did not know, could not know, was that Marcus Reed had not come to that summit to network or posture, but to quietly decide where to place the largest private investment of his career, an investment that would determine which of three competing tech giants would control a revolutionary energy storage patent recently acquired through a shell company. And as fate would have it, Hartwell Dynamics was on that shortlist, not because Marcus admired Evelyn, but because the engineers beneath her were brilliant and the numbers were undeniable. That night, back in his hotel room overlooking the bay, Marcus replayed the moment in his mind not with anger but with clarity, remembering his grandmother's words from Mississippi, that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time. And so he opened his laptop, reviewed his notes, and struck Hartwell Dynamics from the list without drama, without announcement, replacing it with a smaller, more ethically aligned competitor called Celira Systems, a company Wall Street analysts dismissed as promising but underpowered. And then he slept peacefully. The next morning, Evelyn woke to chaos, because overnight Hartwell's stock had dipped. Inexplicably, just a few points, nothing catastrophic, but enough to trigger whispers, because rumors were already circulating that a major institutional investor had chosen Celira over Hartwell. Rumors Evelyn dismissed until her CFO burst into her office pale-faced, explaining that Marcus Reed's firm, Reed Capital Holdings, had just filed public disclosures confirming a multi-billion-dollar stake in Celira, along with an option for board control. And suddenly Evelyn felt something unfamiliar crawl up her spine. Not fear, but disbelief, because she had assumed Marcus was irrelevant, symbolic at best, and yet here he was, reshaping the market without ever raising his voice. Over the following weeks, the consequences multiplied, Celira's valuation soared, Hartwell's best engineers began fielding recruiter calls. Journalists dug up old articles about the ethics lawsuit from Evelyn's father's era, and one op-ed even mentioned the optics problem of leadership culture at Hartwell, citing anonymous sources who described subtle exclusion at executive events, and though no one mentioned the handshake, Evelyn could feel it haunting her, that moment replaying now not as triumph but as miscalculation. And when Hartwell lost a critical government contract to Celira due to alignment with long-term sustainability values, Evelyn finally did something she had never done before. She asked for a meeting with Marcus Reed. The email she sent was brief, professionally worded, and dripping with corporate neutrality, proposing a discussion for mutual benefit. And she fully expected either a polite decline or a negotiation-heavy response. But what she received instead was silence, days of it, during which Hartwell's stock slid further and the board began asking pointed questions.